In the shadowy hills of 1830s Kentucky, a pair of twins were born, bound not just by blood, but by something far more sinister. Their existence defied logic. Their connection defied death. And to this day, no scientist, no historian, no skeptic has been able to explain what happened, or why the whispers in the valley have never gone silent. In the early months of 1830, a harsh winter hung over the hills of eastern Kentucky. Life was simple and often cruel in the backwoods communities, where medicine remained rudimentary and superstition held sway over reason. Isolated towns relied on midwives more than doctors, and the line between folklore and fact often blurred. It was in one such remote village, tucked deep within the Appalachian foothills, that the twins were born, an event that would soon disturb the peace and rattle the foundations of belief for everyone who witnessed it. The mother, a young woman of little means and no family name of note, had lived quietly in the outskirts with her husband. They were newcomers, settled on a piece of land left abandoned for years, rumored to be touched by something unnatural. Their presence had been met with wariness by the older families, but no one expected what would follow. When labor struck, it lasted 3 nights. The local midwife, a woman hardened by decades of delivering children under every condition imaginable, would later whisper that she had never seen birth bring that kind of cold into a room. From the outset, the birth was wrong. The air grew inexplicably heavy inside the cabin. Candles flickered violently, though no draft was present. As the twins entered the world, one just moments after the other, both were silent. No crying, no movement. For several minutes the room stood still, the midwife frozen in shock. Then, without warning, both infants began to breathe, simultaneously in perfect synchronization, and finally cried out. But even their cries, villagers would later say, sounded unholy, too deep, too hollow, too matched. The midwife wrapped the twins and handed them to the exhausted mother, who clutched them tightly as if sensing something fragile, something dangerous, had been brought into her life. She gave them no names. In fact, the twins would remain unnamed for weeks. A strange custom in those parts, perhaps, but some began to speculate that the parents had no say in what to call them, that the names would be chosen, or revealed, by the twins themselves in time. Over the following days, the village grew restless. Word of the birth spread quickly. Locals claimed animals near the homestead became agitated, some disappearing without a trace. Fires wouldn't stay lit in the couple's home, and shadows clung longer in corners. The mother, pale and wide-eyed, was rarely seen outside. The father, once a friendly man, stopped coming into town altogether. Something about the family had shifted, as though an invisible curtain had dropped between them and the rest of the world. What unsettled people most, however, was the appearance of the twins. Perfectly identical in every physical sense, same eyes, same hands, same small freckle behind the left ear. They were difficult to distinguish, even by the mother. Yet it was their eyes that disturbed people the most. They were an unnatural shade of grey, so light they almost appeared silver in daylight. And they did not blink often. They stared too long, too knowingly. Elders of the town began to murmur. Stories of the old blood surfaced, tales passed down from generations that warned of strange births in the hills, of children bound to unnatural forces, of things buried that should never be unearthed. Many of these legends had faded into obscurity, but the birth of these twins revived them like embers catching flame. There was no illness, no deformity, no official sign of trouble, and yet, deep within every villager's gut, a shared intuition grew. Something had been born in those woods that should not have been, something that didn't belong. And though they couldn't prove it, the people of that quiet Kentucky town felt it in their bones. The twins were not ordinary children, and whatever forces had delivered them into the world were far from finished. As the twins grew, so did the unease surrounding them. From infancy, they exhibited an unsettling synchronicity that defied explanation. Every movement, every gesture, even the most subtle facial expressions were mirrored with eerie precision. When one raised a hand, the other followed. When one laughed, the other smiled, never out of sync, never delayed. At first, this was dismissed as the natural mimicry seen in close siblings, particularly twins. But over time it became clear that this was no ordinary bond. Their connection transcended the physical. It was as if a single consciousness existed across two bodies. The first documented incident that sparked true fear occurred when one of the twins fell ill with a high fever. The other, despite showing no symptoms, began to tremble and sweat at the same time. As the fever rose in one, the other cried out in pain. When the temperature broke, both calmed. The physician who had come from a neighboring town to examine them left visibly shaken, muttering that they shared more than blood. Word spread quickly, as such things always did, and suspicion transformed into quiet dread. Parents began to keep their children away. Neighbors whispered about soul-linking and borrowed bodies, concepts drawn from half-forgotten folk beliefs and backwoods superstition. But even skeptics found it hard to dismiss what came next. As toddlers, the twins displayed an uncanny awareness of each other's experience. When one was touched, the other flinched. When one was startled, the other blinked. When one learned to say a word, the other repeated it without having been taught. They didn't communicate like ordinary children. In fact, they rarely spoke aloud at all. Instead, they often sat for hours in silence, eyes locked, faces blank, as if entire conversations were occurring in their minds. By the age of 5, their behavior had unsettled even the most rational members of the village. Animals fled when the twins approached. Dogs barked and refused to be calmed. One farmer swore that his livestock refused to eat for days after the boys visited the property. Another claimed that his infant daughter screamed the moment the twins looked at her. Whether these accounts were true or exaggerated by fear, they added to the growing belief that the twins were not simply close. They were conjoined in a way that went beyond the physical world. What perplexed observers most was the emotional echo between them. If one twin suffered a small injury, a scraped knee, a stubbed toe, the other would cry out in pain, sometimes before the injury even occurred. If one became frightened, the other would grow pale, as if absorbing the emotion. This went beyond empathy. It suggested a shared sensory experience, a neural or spiritual overlap that no one could explain. Local doctors were baffled, unable to determine a scientific cause. Some theorized it was a rare psychological phenomenon. Others privately suspected it was something darker. What made matters worse was that the twins seemed aware of their own strangeness. They avoided mirrors, rarely looked at other people, and often withdrew into their own world, a world no one else could access. When strangers attempted to separate them, even for a few minutes, both would become violently distressed, not simply upset, but panicked, as if physical distance threatened something vital to their being. It was as if an invisible thread connected them, one that could not be stretched without consequence. The community grew increasingly divided. Some believed the twins were cursed, others that they were gifted or chosen. Rumors swirled that they were omens, warnings of something to come. As they entered adolescence, these rumors would only intensify, fueled by a string of chilling events. But even before the horrors began, one truth had already taken root in the hearts of the townspeople. The twins were bound in a way nature never intended, and whatever held them together, it was growing stronger. By the time the twins reached their 10th year, the atmosphere surrounding them had shifted from wary curiosity to silent fear. The village, once open and communal, had become closed and watchful. People no longer approached the twins or their family. Doors were locked earlier. Eyes followed them from behind curtains. It wasn't merely their unnerving bond or strange behavior anymore. It was the trail of misfortune that seemed to follow wherever they went. The first disappearance was a neighbor's cat. Though small and seemingly inconsequential, it was only the beginning. The cat had gone missing shortly after it was seen hissing violently at the twins, its back arched unnaturally as they passed by. Within a week, a child, a boy who had taunted the twins from a distance, vanished while playing near the edge of the woods. No traces were found, no signs of struggle. Just a cap resting in the dirt, as if deliberately placed. Fear spread rapidly. The town's usual sense of order unraveled. Families began forbidding their children from leaving home unaccompanied. Hunters combed the surrounding forests but found nothing. The twins, when asked if they had seen the missing boy, simply stared in silence. They gave no response, no emotion, no concern. Their mother insisted they had not left the property, but few believed her. After the boy, it became harder to ignore the pattern. Farm and animals disappeared next. Sheep, chickens, goats, vanishing overnight without any indication of predators. No blood, no broken fencing, just the unsettling stillness of empty pens. One farmer claimed that he saw the twins standing near his property the night his livestock disappeared. When confronted, they only tilted their heads in unison, as if confused by the question. Another child went missing weeks later. A girl this time, known to be particularly sensitive, had once told her parents the twins talked without talking, and that they could see her dreams. Her disappearance sent the town into a state of silent panic. It wasn't just the fear of losing another child, it was the mounting realization that something far beyond ordinary danger was unfolding in their midst. With no evidence to accuse and no authority strong enough to intervene, suspicion turned inward. The villagers grew distrustful of one another. Friends began keeping secrets. Neighbors accused neighbors of harboring dark beliefs or failing to report strange sightings. Superstition became survival. Charms were hung on doors, religious icons placed in windows, and salt poured along thresholds, and yet nothing stopped the quiet vanishing. The twins, seemingly untouched by the growing chaos, moved through the town like shadows, always together, always watching, always silent. Even their parents seemed to fade from public life. Whispers spread that the mother had gone mute, that the father had aged 10 years in 6 months. No one dared visit their home anymore. The few who tried to confront the situation found themselves plagued by misfortune. One man, who openly declared the twins as cursed, suffered a seizure the next day and lost his ability to speak. Another, who claimed he would drive them out of the village, was found in his barn days later, unmoving and unresponsive. He remained in that state for the rest of his life. Coincidence was no longer a satisfying explanation. What troubled the villagers most was not what they saw, but what they felt. An oppressive weight hung in the air whenever the twins passed by. Dreams grew darker, sleep became restless, even the animals became uneasy. It was as if the town itself had shifted, bent inward around a hidden, unseen force centered on the boys, something ancient, something unknowable. As the disappearances continued without reason or resolution, the villagers stopped asking questions aloud. Silence became the only protection, because by then, everyone had come to the same unspoken conclusion. The twins were not just connected to the mystery, they were the mystery, and whatever had come with them had only just begun. By the time the twins reached adolescence, the town was hollow with fear. What had started as an unsettling presence had evolved into a quiet nightmare, one that refused to name itself but made its existence known in the most chilling ways. No one dared confront the family directly. Few even spoke of the twins anymore. They had become a fact of life, like a long drought or an inherited curse, unwelcome, dangerous, and beyond human remedy. Then came the death. It happened suddenly, without warning. One of the twins, by all accounts healthy and strong, was found lifeless in his bed one morning. No wounds, no illness, no struggle. His eyes were open, his face peaceful, as if he had simply stopped being. The parents did not weep publicly. They did not call for help. Word of the death spread slowly, as if people were afraid to speak it aloud, as if naming it would summon something worse. For a moment, the town exhaled. There was an unspoken hope, guilt-ridden yet palpable, that the strange events would finally come to an end, that with one twin gone, the unnatural bond would break, that the darkness would lift. But that hope evaporated quickly, because the surviving twin changed in ways that defied understanding. He did not mourn, at least not outwardly, but something in his demeanor shifted, as if an internal balance had been destroyed. At first he went still, moving and speaking even less than before. Then he began to display behaviors that unsettled even those who had grown numb to his presence. He would stare at people and mimic voices that were not his own, voices the villagers recognized. He began answering questions before they were asked. He seemed to appear where no one had seen him approach. Most disturbingly, he began speaking in unison with his dead brother's exact cadence and phrasing. Some began to say he wasn't alone anymore, that whatever link had bound the two in life had not ended with death, that it had deepened, strengthened, evolved. Those closest to the tragedy claimed to hear footsteps in the house long after dark, pairs of them, the sound of 2 sets of breathing, the sensation of 2 gazes, not one. The surviving twin was once seen speaking into a mirror for hours, his lips moving silently, as if in conversation. On another occasion, he was found standing in the center of the cemetery, at the unmarked grave where his brother had been buried, eyes wide and glassy, unmoving in the rain for an entire night. The disappearances resumed, this time more erratic. Livestock were no longer simply vanishing. They were found mutilated, often arranged in symbolic shapes no one could decipher. A local priest, brought in from another county to bless the village, fell gravely ill after visiting the family's property. He claimed in his delirium to have seen two souls occupying one flesh. He died 3 days later, and still no one acted. Fear had paralyzed the town. It was no longer just about the twins. It was about the force that seemed to inhabit the surviving one, a presence too persistent, too intelligent, and too foreign to be human. Some whispered that death had only removed the veil, that the living twin had become a vessel, a conduit, that the force they once thought was between the twins had not been a connection at all, but a singular entity split into two hosts. And now, reunited in a single form, it was more powerful than ever. Whatever the truth was, one thing was certain. The death of one had not weakened the mystery. It had unlocked it. And from that point forward, the boundary between life and death, self and other, became meaningless in the presence of the surviving twin. Nearly 2 centuries have passed since the strange events unfolded in the hills of Kentucky, yet the story of the twins remains a source of hushed speculation and unresolved dread. Local records from the 1830s are inconsistent, some missing, others deliberately altered or censored. What little documentation remains is fragmented, filled with vague references to the disturbances, the mirrored child, and the winter that turned quiet. No official investigations were ever concluded. No names were clearly preserved. What remains is an eerie silence in the historical record, punctuated by rumors and oral accounts passed down through generations. Locals still speak of the family's homestead, though it has long since collapsed into ruin. Travelers who venture too close often report strange sensations, sudden chills, dizziness, or the uncanny feeling of being watched. Some claim that compasses fail to work near the site, and that even birds avoid flying over the area. Though rational explanations exist for some of these occurrences, mineral deposits, environmental factors, collective paranoia, none can fully account for the intensity or consistency of these reports. Attempts by modern investigators to understand the case have led nowhere. Psychologists who study twin phenomena often reference the story as a cautionary tale of overinterpretation and folklore, yet even the most skeptical researchers admit that something unusual took place. Identical twins can, in rare instances, display strong emotional and physical connections, but shared injuries, predictive behaviors, post-mortem mimicry, these details do not align with any known psychological or neurological model. Some theorists suggest a socio-cultural explanation. In a deeply superstitious 19th-century rural community, a set of peculiar twins could easily become a focal point for mass hysteria. Misfortune, once random, becomes conveniently attributed to those perceived as different. In this view, the twins were victims of their environment, products of isolation, fear, and ignorance. But this perspective does little to explain the sheer volume of consistent, eerily specific accounts that have surfaced, many of which were recorded decades apart by unrelated sources. Others turn to more esoteric interpretations. Occult historians have pointed to obscure Appalachian folklore that speaks of split souls or mirrored spirits, entities that occupy two vessels but share a single consciousness. While such stories are largely symbolic in nature, some believe the twins were not merely strange but supernatural. These theories often cite the symmetry of the twins' behavior, the timing of the unexplained events, and the transformation that followed one twin's death as evidence of something beyond human understanding. Despite the lack of scientific consensus, interest in the case continues to grow. Books, podcasts, and documentaries have explored the mystery from every angle: paranormal, psychological, folkloric, and conspiratorial. Yet each attempt to explain the events only seems to deepen the mystery. Every detail, every account raises more questions than it answers. Why did the town never name the twins in any official record? Why did no religious authority document the burial rites? Why were the parents never interviewed even as the village descended into fear? Why, even today, do descendants of that town refuse to discuss the case, often ending conversations with a firm warning, "Let the dead stay buried"? Perhaps the most disturbing element is that the story never truly ends. Even in modern times, occasional reports emerge from nearby areas, sightings of a young boy with silver eyes, or of twin-like figures standing silently by tree lines at dusk. These sightings, though unverified, echo the old fears in a chilling way. They suggest that the legacy of the twins is not confined to the past, that whatever force animated their lives may not have been buried with them, and so the mystery remains. Neither science nor faith has provided answers. The story of the twins endures as a dark enigma, unresolved, unprovable, and unforgettable. A legend not content to be forgotten. A warning carved into the hills of Kentucky, where some say the earth itself remembers.